If the phrase inner child makes you want to switch to a different podcast, I get it. It used to sound like psychobabble to me too, something for people who needed an excuse, not an explanation. It sounded soft and therapeutic with little to do with the actual mess of a broken life or a broken marriage. But here's what I've learned from my own story and from years of sitting with people who've been shattered by infidelity. Most of what drives infidelity didn't start in the marriage. It started a long time before that. And if you don't look there, you're working on the surface of something that runs much deeper. Today, I'm talking with Kayla Crane, a therapist in Colorado who does something important. She helps people understand how the coping patterns they built in childhood are still running the show in their adult relationships, sometimes subtly, sometimes catastrophically. This episode is for the betrayed partner who keeps asking why and keeps hitting a wall. And it's for the involved partner who honestly doesn't have the answer because it just happened isn't good enough. It can't be. The real answer usually starts much earlier than either of you realizes.
Welcome to The Recovery Room, a podcast presented by affairhealing.com.
In this healing place, in this healing place.
For someone who doesn't even understand what inner child work means, for them that might either sound weird or even creepy, for someone who has no understanding of it. So explain what that is.
We are formed as human beings in childhood, right? That's how we become who we are, the way we operate, all of those things. So we learn how to adapt to things and all of these as children, right? Any kind of adversity that we experience as children, we learn how to respond to those things. And it worked really well because we're all here today, right? So since it works so well, it doesn't just go away. Those memories and how to deal with the adversity, it lives inside of us. That's kind of our inner child. It's trying to protect us. It's constantly trying to protect us. And that's not necessarily through parents. Sometimes it's with parents, but even with schoolmates or any experience, where they were hurt or had any kind of emotional injury. Everyone around us as kids doesn't necessarily know what we needed to feel better.
Yeah.
Right. Every single human child needs something different to feel better. And we only know that as ourselves as adults. We have the ability to offer our inner child, that little kiddo that was trying to help us and protect us. We have the opportunity to offer them the things that we really needed that no one knew that we needed or no one was able to give us that we needed.
So the inner child, it just refers to those patterns, those norms we developed out of necessity as children that helped us adapt to whatever environment we had to survive in that. And that became kind of the defined normal to how we feel, how we behave, all those things. And you're saying that just doesn't disappear when you stop being a child. Those patterns stay with you. So the inner child work is understanding that, identifying it, and having some insight into how that continues to affect us even in our adult life. How does understanding that adaptation that you went through and still carry with you, how is that different from just blaming your childhood for all the crap you have to deal with now?
Whenever I work with clients in this way, I always make a point to help them appreciate their inner child and show gratitude for all that they've done. Recognize hey, this was really protective. Thank you so much. Your intent was always to protect me. Instead of blaming it, it's more of an understanding. We're looking instead of at the outside factors as much, we're looking with the inner child, we're looking at how the child responded to those things. So we're not really looking for a why this thing happened or reasoning. That's not really the focus with it. The focus is more on acknowledging those adaptations and in the way your inner child protected you. So focusing more on that piece than the external factors, if that makes sense.
So when someone does recognize the pattern, and for example, they might say, oh, I'm leaving my house when conflict comes up. I'm leaving my house the same way that I used to hide in my room as a kid when there was conflict. And when they realize, oh, I still do that thing, and I kind of see where it came from. What has to happen next in order for them to change?
Well, first, of course, that awareness, right? But then also when I do inner child work with clients, I take them through experiential exercises where they actually have a conversation with their inner child. And it's really, really fascinating because I do have some people that they're kind of maybe a little skeptical or something. And sometimes I'll ask, like, what is that child feeling? And sometimes they'll say, I don't know. In that instance, I'll direct them to ask the inner child and they'll get an answer. So it's pretty interesting because it's like, wait, I don't know what they're thinking, but they're actually in there, right? Like they're thinking something. And so, yeah, recognizing that adaptation, what purpose did it serve? Really showing gratitude and appreciation for what they did for us. I always guide people into expressing that gratitude. And even though it was adaptive then, but today it's maladaptive because it's immature, because we developed it when we were around 5, that adaptation. So first acknowledging it, and then having that conversation with your adaptive child and reminding them like, hey, I can protect you now. Thank you for protecting me for all of these years. You've done a great job. I'm going to protect you now. I have resources you don't have. I can take care of us as a grown-up in a way that you deserve to be taken care of as a child. Sometimes even in the moment when you do go to that automatic adaptation in your mind or out loud saying like, hey, stand behind me. I'll stand between you and my angry partner, right? And I'll protect us. I can do it better than you can. I guide them to say, you can be a kid now. You can just go play. You can do things that you should have always been able to do. You don't have to keep working to protect me for so long.
Yeah, I think there can be something powerful about being able to identify those things in our life that have always been normal, familiar, those patterns that developed, and being able to see, oh, that's where it comes from. And even visualizing, oh, that's that childhood version of me showing up, in all the ways it's responding. There was a time in my life early in my trying to figure my stuff out when this idea of dealing with your childhood and your inner child, it would just always feel like, oh, that's woo-woo stuff. It's just like, I don't need to do that. I just need to understand what does I need to change and how do I start taking those steps? But I'll tell you what, I remember a very early exercise that I was led into where I considered that childhood version of me and kind of got in touch, and it wasn't anything weird. It was just this thoughtful leading into considering that version of me and even having a conversation with that version of me. Something I thought, okay, this is going to be kind of weird, but I'll tell you what, it was a powerful experience for me. And in some ways, a turning point of perspective. So there can be really value in this work for sure.
Yeah. For so long, we usually are thinking, oh, why do I do that? Why do I shut down? Or why do I escape or whatever that adaptation is? And we kind of can sometimes shame ourselves or people can shame us for those behaviors. But when you have that understanding of, oh my gosh, this served a purpose, right? I'm not just acting like this to hurt my partner by shutting down or whatever. Like, no, this really served a purpose and it helped us protect ourselves. And so I think it does really change your perspective because you can also be cognizant of, okay, wait a second, this is what I'm doing here. It makes sense. And I can do things differently. It almost sometimes gives you permission to do it differently and to learn how to do it differently. Like, this isn't just who you are. You can change it. You can do it differently. So I think that that's a helpful way to shift that perspective.
My audience is primarily made up of people who have been affected by infidelity in some way.
Right.
So let's think about that from that context. And when you start with family of origin work, when you're working with a client, that's your beginning point. What are you listening for that might later help a betrayed partner hear the story of the affair differently, consider that differently than they did before?
I find doing inner child work in the presence of their partner, because they'll have some kind of response and I'll say, bring that feeling up and let's go back there. And so we're going to a memory of having that same experience. And then we go through having a conversation with that child, and I'll say, ask the child what it's like to be them. What is their life like? Ask them what they're feeling. Ask them how they're protecting you today. That question can be really important because they're protecting you by using that adaptation. When their partner can hear that, they'll say, now it kind of makes sense. It doesn't necessarily make it hurt less. It's an explanation, not an excuse. There's so many why, right, with infidelity. And so it can kind of put pieces to the puzzle. And when we get to the why, let's understand this. It's, oh my gosh, when I felt not loved, I would behave in this way. And so like being able to pick those out as a really good foundation, coming up with those beliefs, and then going through the rest of the work where we go through the relationship history and the story of the infidelity, we can really plug those beliefs in. Like, it helps just have a little bit more understanding of why did this happen. Without that, the hurt partner is only left to believe it's me. There's something wrong with me.
Oftentimes when you start exploring that why, one response that is often first provided by the involved partner is something like, I don't know, it just happened. And when you hear someone say, it just happened, I mean, what do you hear underneath that?
Well, I also hear confusion because they don't know why either, usually, but I make it very clear, we can't leave it there, because your partner needs some understanding, because if all we have is it just happened, then how can they ever have any confidence that it won't happen again? We have to figure it out. I was giving some silly analogy the other day about this, and I said, if there's like a cracked stair or something and you trip and you break your leg, you need to recognize that stair was cracked. Otherwise, you're going to keep breaking your leg. And so you have to understand that piece of it in order to, as best as possible, prevent it from happening again.
Do you think that affairs are more often about unmet adult needs or unresolved childhood needs? I know that's an either or, and answers aren't always that clean, but what's your opinion about that?
Those adaptations are formed in response to some kind of negative belief that you hold about yourself. And that's why, like I said, we've got to create that foundation from childhood. But those beliefs don't go away. You can work on them, you can improve them, you can reframe, you can do all of that. But somebody felt unlovable as a child, they don't just automatically feel lovable as an adult, right? And so it's kind of both of them, right? The belief is formed, but then as an adult, they're trying to feel lovable or whatever. So that's the need that's in some way not getting met. And so that's causing them to act that way. But it all originates in childhood.
It's really important to understand that connection. I can't tell you how many times I talk to coaches and counselors who work with relationships. They may not specialize in infidelity, but they have to deal with it. Anybody that works with marriages and couples deals with unfaithfulness. And it's really common that the reaction to an affair is something like, well, the affair obviously exposes some things that were lacking in the marriage, some needs that were unmet. So a solution is identifying those things and learning how to develop a relationship that is satisfying to both. But they really seem to be examining on the patterns of that adult relationship and not really consider, yeah, but there's a deeper motivation here. There's a deeper drive. And if you don't deal with that, you can do your best to check some things off the list, improve some behaviors, and it even feels good for a while. But eventually
that other stuff that hasn't been dealt with is going to show up. I feel pretty strongly about that. And it's because of my own example. And listen, this may not be true for everybody, but if someone had come into our world when I had my affair, and initially we both said, let's try to fix our marriage. But if they said, okay, let's take a look at where you guys have been. You acknowledge you did a bad thing. You're sorry for it. What does change look like? And we talked about the disappointments and disconnections in our marriage. I mean, we both could have talked about that, and there would have been truth in all of that. But I was totally oblivious to those things in me that kept driving me in certain directions or certain responses. So I imagine if that's all the farther we'd gone to, we would have felt, okay, here's something we can do, we can try, and might even felt better for a while. But I have no doubt my stuff would have showed up again.
Yeah. It always shows up, right? Like, and even when people, I mean, you probably know when people say, I don't even think about that. It doesn't affect me at all. It's like, well, but you're still operating as that. Or, your inner child is like screaming, like, I don't feel lovable, or I'm not worthy, or whatever it is. It's kind of a Band-Aid. You can look at just the surface and say, okay, when you don't prioritize your partner, they don't feel lovable, or whatever it is. And so prioritize your partner. But this belief that they hold inside of them that shows up in every way. One of my beliefs is I'm going to be rejected. I can get there anyway. Like anything could happen and I can somehow feel rejected by that. And so if we only focus on the really obvious things, those beliefs are still going to kind of creep out with things that don't even necessarily make very black and white sense. When someone didn't say bye to me, I feel rejected. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that and have that self-awareness of when are these feelings come up. I always say, like, feelings are real, but they're not facts. So I can feel rejected, and that's real. It's also not necessarily a fact somebody's rejecting me. So that's my own stuff to deal with. My partner can be considerate of that and do their best, but a lot of it is my own stuff. I've got to be aware and kind of manage those emotions without acting out.
Can you give an example of how two different childhood adaptations come into play in a marriage and they kind of collide with each other?
Yeah.
What might that look like?
For example, so if somebody has an adaptation of fixing, right? Like, how can I make sure everyone's okay? What do I need to do? And if their partner has an adaptation of avoiding, the fixer is going to feel really, really uncomfortable when they don't have the opportunity to fix, right? Because it's like, just be okay with somebody not feeling good. Be okay with somebody being mad at you. That can be incredibly dysregulating. And the reverse, right? The person who's trying to take some space, like, you need to be okay with somebody kind of intruding on you. So those can kind of work against each other.
Yeah, I didn't know in my own story. I mean, as an adult, I was always very resistant, especially when I was in a serious relationship, to a woman's strong negative emotion, or just strong emotion, maybe general, unless it was sexual passion. I was fine with that. But the other stuff, yeah, whether it was a need for, I need to be closer to you, or whether it was anger, or whether it was hurt. And I learned that in my childhood from my parents. I didn't understand that before. Mm-hmm. I understand it now, but when it was happening and I didn't have that insight, I just blamed the other person. And I thought I was just doing what's necessary. I'm being controlled. I'm being responsible. You shouldn't be so emotional. You're being manipulative. You're being needy. I mean, those were all the things that I would tell myself. And I wasn't trying to be cruel. That's just what I had learned. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I began realizing, oh, you believe those things, you feel those things, you tell yourself those things because you learned that in your childhood. And there was a reason that you needed to protect yourself, but you don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's really, it doesn't instantly change, but it starts with that understanding can be really helpful. So,
yeah, that's kind of, what I mean when you show that appreciation, but also reassurance, like, thank you. And I've got it from here. I can take care of both of us in a more mature, grown-up way. I can protect us in ways that you couldn't protect us as a child. You could only do whatever you could do.
If you appreciate the Affair Recovery Room podcast, we'd like to know. We'd like others to know too. Please take a minute to give us a good review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever service you use. To those of you who do, thank you so much.
Do you ever worry that focusing on childhood explanations for our adult behaviors, that could unintentionally minimize our responsibility as adults?
Yeah, it is kind of a delicate situation because although it's important to recognize all the factors and the hurt partner is in the relationship with the factors, you've got to be careful to not make the hurt partner feel like it's their fault or it's their responsibility. And so it can definitely kind of come up. Like I said, I continue to reinforce, like, this is just helping us understand. And you know what, like, we all have needs that don't get met, or we need something different. Your partner needed something, and this is the worst way they could have figured out, right? Like, it is okay for things to not be great and for your partner not to be getting what they need. If they can get to a place where you guys can have a conversation and problem solve, how can you get your need met?
Mm-hmm.
But that is the involved partners. That's their responsibility to figure out an appropriate way to get their need met, or find somebody who can help them with that, like a therapist or something. What they did is the worst way to do that. And so again, normalizing it, but also like continuing to highlight everyone's sometimes not getting what they are needing. And I say to the hurt partner, there are plenty of times that you weren't getting what you needed and you didn't go cheat. And so it's doable to not do that, you know?
Well, listen, I think the work that you do is really important. And I'm thankful for this conversation, and people listening to it can maybe consider, is that something I need to work on more? I need to seek out someone like Kayla that can help me figure this out so that I can be a better adult. I mean, it can move us to change that can be really healthy change. Where do people go to find out about you?
Yeah, my website is just southdenvertherapy.com. And I can also be found on Facebook and Instagram with the same South Denver Therapy.
I'll provide links to that in the episode notes. Thank you for what you do and for sharing that with our listeners. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Faith over failure.